I welcome you to this lecture. It is all about the lecture method. We are having the objectives, the lecture method, understanding the components of a lecture method, and later on we will be discussing the advantages and disadvantages of the lecture method. A lecture is a talk or verbal presentation given by a lecturer, trainer or speaker to an audience. Lecture consists of an oral reading of a text followed by a commentary. Lecture as a method of teaching engages the instructor in giving an oral presentation of facts or principles to the learners. Lecturing is the most common and established method of teaching at universities and colleges around the world. The traditional or classical characterization of the lecture is of approximately 50 to 55 minutes of uninterrupted discourse by a professor or instructor from a fixed position at the front of a classroom or auditorium. During this period of time, student activity is typically limited to listening, note-taking, and possibly a few questions. This method is economical, can be used for a large number of students, material can be covered in a structured manner, and the teacher has a great control of time and material. Lecturing is not simply a matter of standing in front of a class and reciting what you know. The classroom lecture is a special form of communication in which voice, gesture, movement, facial expression and eye contact can either complement or detract from the content. Lecture method presents factual material in direct and logical manner, stimulates thinking to open discussion, and is useful for larger groups. With planning and effective presentation techniques, the lecture can be a highly effective and interactive method for transferring knowledge to students. Lecture gives pupils training in listening and taking rapid notes. It creates new ideas and develops creativity among students. The basic purpose of lecturing is the dissemination of information. A teacher identifies important information for the learners and transmits this knowledge in the lecture. Since lecturing is considered the cornerstone of university teaching, it is an effective method for communicating theories, ideas, and facts to students. The lecture method is recommended for high consensus disciplines, those in which there is agreement on the fundamental principles and procedures, such as maths and the natural sciences. Lecture as a model of teaching is frequently criticized, but it is a fact that it has managed to survive so long in pace of many technological developments. Lectures are often used to teach organized bodies of knowledge, which is an important part of this school curriculum at all levels, and they have continued as a primary form of instruction in colleges and universities. In almost all lessons or learning conditions, the teacher has to present information and ideas. He has to introduce topics, summarize the main points of the learning activity, and stimulate further learning. All these activities require the use of lecture explanation techniques. Lectures remain popular for several reasons, just like number one, they are efficient. Planning time is devoted to organizing the context. Less attention has to be devoted to teaching strategy. They are flexible and can be adapted to a wide range of subjects. Most people can learn to lecture well enough to survive in a classroom. Lectures are easier to learn than most other instructional strategies. They are easier for teacher due to simply telling students about the subject. So lecture method is considered as a popular teaching model in different subjects of sciences, engineering, and medicine. This has to be noted that the lecture method, just like any other method, is inappropriate as all-purpose method, but it can serve many useful instructional purposes. The lecture explanation approach, when used properly, can inspire enthusiasm and capture the student imagination. It is most effective common method in teaching lower cognitive levels of knowledge and comprehension. We can think of lecturing as serving three main purposes. Number 1, to transmit information to students. Number 2, to stimulate interest among students. And the third one, to foster understanding among students. Now, planning a lecture. Research findings and expert opinion has identified that certain teaching procedures should be included in a lecture. They are essential to an effective lecture, one that helps students to learn most easily and effectively. An effective lecture is composed of three components. It is having an introduction, body, and conclusion, designed to promote and support learning. The introduction. The introduction usually covers the first 3 to 5 minutes of the lecture. This time is crucial in determining how well students learn and retain the information to be presented. The main purpose is to provide a framework for students' learning and providing the structure for the lecture's content information. It is also necessary to gain students' attention. If we fail to capture students' attention during the introduction, we won't be able to retain it during the rest of the lecture. The introduction consists of certain tasks on the part of a teacher. Number 1, establish a relationship with the audience. Make warm-up comments and initiate rapport to set the tune of the class. Establish friendly communication to provide a positive learning environment in which students feel comfortable. Use an icebreaker to introduce yourself during your first meeting with students and maintain an approachable relationship with students in subsequent classes. Gain attention and foster motivation. Relate the students' goals and interests. You might present a meaningful problem to students and describe the lecture as a solution to that problem. You might also introduce the lecture by describing how it will help students to be successful in their education and careers, or by relating it to your students' inherent curiosity. Prompt awareness of relevant pre-existing knowledge. Students need to see how the new lecture information relates to their motivation. What can you do? Clarify the purpose of the lecture and describe how it is organized. Research supports a correlation between clarity of objectives and student achievement. Students will achieve at higher levels if they know what knowledge and skills they should gain from this instruction. This can be accomplished by announcing the lecture topic and listing the objectives. Now, body of the lecture. The body of the lecture covers the content in an organized way. Since the component is allotted the greatest amount of class time, it includes many more teaching procedures than the introduction and conclusion. This is where you must consult your lecture notes, while at the same time maintaining rapport with your students. Lecture material is a combination of facts, concepts, principles, and generalizations. Concept represents a class of terms, that is, it is an idea usually expressed in a word. and principles communicate relationships among these concepts. Generalizations are relationships between or among concepts expressed at a higher level of abstraction than a principle. In a lecture, the general tendency is to present one fact after another. This type of information giving is ineffective because students cannot see the relationship or organization of the new ideas. Instead, what can you do? It is best to present a concept, one idea, by first defining it and then giving many concrete examples of the concept. As you introduce new concepts, link them together into principles and then into generalizations, each time adding concrete examples as you develop these relationships. In addition, a lecture should be organized based on the relationship of the ideas presented. Examples of relationships that can be used to organize lecture information, which include component, that is part to whole. Component shows how a larger idea is composed of several smaller ones. Sequential, it deals with chronological or cause-effect relationships. Material to purpose, information or a procedure is presented followed by its purpose or use. Comparison, comparing two or more things using explicit basis for comparison. Use transition words while lecturing. Using transitions or links, just like therefore, because, as a result, show how pieces of lecture information relate to each other. Verbal or oral cues also alert students to more significant information. Just like, it is especially important to remember, please note the following. You will need to memorize. I will ask you to recognize. You should be able to apply, so on and so forth. Remember to include audio-visual aids while delivering your lecture. Using PowerPoint slides, transparencies, or even the chalkboard will enliven and strengthen the presentation of ideas and thus assist students' learning. Include active learning. It is crucial to provide opportunities for active learning during any instruction, including a lecture. Active learning allows students opportunity to practice using the lecture information and obtain feedback on the accuracy of their responses. At the end of the lecture, you can use the minute paper by asking students to respond in 1 or 2 sentences to the questions, just like, what were the focal areas in today's lecture? Or, what ideas from today's lecture are still unclear to you? Capture attention. You need to capture the attention of the students. Maintain attention throughout your lecture by employing techniques such as vary student activities, lecture for 15 minutes and then provide an active learning activity. Change the mode of presentation, for example, oral to visual or visual to oral. Employ concept-related humor. Demonstrate enthusiasm about your subject. Encourage note-taking by speaking slowly and repeating important information. Provide motivational cues. You can say, on the next exam, you will be asked to like this and that. Now, we shift to the conclusion of the lecture. The most frequently neglected component of the lecture should be used to reinforce students' learning of the information as well as to clarify any misconceptions regarding their understanding of the concepts presented. As lecturers, you can try to do certain things in your lecture conclusion, just like repeat and emphasize main points. Signal students that you are going to summarize and re-emphasize main points, or even better, have several students summarized your main points. This procedure will help you to get feedback as to whether or not students identified the important information. It is also helpful to rephrase information in order to clarify key ideas. Encourage questions from students. Ask specific leading questions to your students. By doing so, you will encourage your students to revive their notes and formulate questions of their own. In this way, any misconceptions can be clarified and understanding can be reinforced. You can also relate content to previous and subsequent topics. The last few statements in the conclusion should provide a connection between this lecture and previous lectures as well as those to follow. As students see the relationship among major concepts presented in different lectures, they gain a sense of direction. Dear students, now let us see what are the important things to remember. Lecture delivery. Non-verbal behaviors play a significant role in effective public speaking. They can enrich or elaborate the spoken message. There are basically two aspects to non-verbal behavior: body language and voice. There are some elements which make up body language. Number one, speaker audience distance. The more distance, psychological as well as physical, between speaker and audience, the more formal the atmosphere. If you desire to create a more informal atmosphere, you should reduce these barriers. Engage yourself in meaningful moments from time to time and walk in the rows as you present information or carry on discussions with students. Body movement and stance. To communicate, you must compensate for distance by employing larger gestures and more volume. Body movement and posture can convey messages to your audience. Facial expressions. A significant portion of the emotional impact of a speaker's message is conveyed by facial expressions. Facial expressions tell students how you feel about them and yourself and give students cues to help them interpret the content of the message. Regular eye contact helps you establish credibility. Look directly at different individuals as though you were carrying on a conversation with them. Gestures. Purposeful movements of the head, arms, hands and shoulders accentuate or dramatize ideas. Three characteristics of effective gestures include relaxation, vigor and timing. Use your body to indicate a change of topic or transition. Voice variables allow the speaker to make a message clear and interesting. Some of the vocal characteristics of good speaking are: strength. Speak loudly enough so that the audience does not have to strain to hear. Enunciation. Make an effort to speak crisply, avoiding slurring or skipping parts of words in order to limit the possibility of misunderstanding. Your pronunciation too is important. Meeting your audience's expectations in regard to acceptable pronunciation. Rate of speech. In a large lecture with students concentrating on note taking, a rate of 120 to 130 words per minute is comfortable. Variety. Vary the characteristics of your voice in terms of rate, pitch, stress, pauses, volume and inflection. Pauses. Pauses can provide emphasis and allow students time to think and take notes. Furthermore, pausing indicates that you are a conscientious speaker who thinks about what you are going to say. However, filling in pauses with sounds like well, oh, make a presentation seem disconnected and can be distracting. Dear students, now let us see what are the additional hints for a successful lecture. Present an outline of the lecture. Use the blackboard, overhead transparency or handout and refer to it as you move from point to point. Repeat points in several different ways. Include examples and concrete ideas. Use short sentences in your lecturing. Stress important points through your tone or explicit comments. Number 5. Pause to give listeners time to think and write. Use lectures to complement, not simply repeat the text. Avoid racing through the last part of the lecture. This is a common error made by instructors wishing to cram too much information into the allotted time. Schedule time for discussion in the same or separate class periods. And the last, prepare. Preparation reduces stress, frustration, insecurity and consequent ineffectiveness. Dear students, advantages and disadvantages of the lecture method. It provides an economical and efficient method for delivering substantial amounts of information to large numbers of students. Number 2, it affords a necessary framework or overview for subsequent learning, for example, reading assignments, small group activities, discussion, etc. Number 3, it offers current information more up to date than most texts from many sources. Number 4, it provides a summary or synthesis of information from different sources. And the last one, it creates interest in a subject as lecturers transmit enthusiasm about their discipline. Dear students, there are disadvantages to using the lecture method as a primary teaching method. An effective lecture requires both extensive research and preparation and effective delivery skills to maintain students' attention and motivation. In addition, the lecture has other drawbacks. Number 1, it does not afford the instructor with ways to provide students with individual feedback. Number 2, it is difficult to adapt to individual learning differences. Number 3, it may fail to promote active learning unless other teaching strategies such as questioning and problem solving activities are incorporated into the lecture. Number 4, it does not promote independent learning. Students, to conclude, let me say that lecture method is a widely used method in which the teacher talks while students listen and make notes. It is generally agreed that lecturing can be effective if there is direct interaction between the teacher and students through communication. Therefore, it is necessary that the teacher organizes lecture in such a way that students take an active part in the learning process. In order to make the lecture effective, one must decide about the specific topic which is neither too general nor too lengthy that the teacher will not be able to complete it effectively in the allotted time. The teacher must know the objectives he wishes to realize in terms of the instruction. The teacher should know how to develop and sustain interest of the students. Some theoretical background is necessary, which may assist the teacher in furthering his lesson he wants to teach. Dear students, it was all for today's lecture, hoping that you might have understood the content. Thank you.